Hello, hello, everybody, and welcome back to season 2 of Inspire Me Forward. How exciting! I am so excited to just to say that. And we're on episode 16. I know I said 15, but we are on episode 16. And with me, I have Kate Neligan, and she has titled this one Speaking Our Deep Truth. So, Kate, I'd love just to have you introduce yourself for a minute, and then I'll come back and say a few things.
Sure. Well, thanks for having me. I'm really excited for this topic, and my intention is that it helps a lot of people. I am an equine partnered life and business coach. So I partner horses and humans in personal and professional growth and transformation. I'm also an animal communicator and healer, and writer and speaker.
Excellent. Thank you. And you're out of Colorado, you say, right?
Yes,
Beautiful
as of now,
Colorado.
older couple.
Oh, lovely. How's the weather down there now? It's like here it goes to rain and wind and snow and
Yeah, we're heat coming in this week, I think. So
excellent, excellent. Okay, so season 2 is going to be, and I think we've termed it Inspired Voices. And the fact that, I sat with it for so long and it just, that just kept coming to me that, the sharing our authentic voices, sharing our true expression of ourselves, and that can be in teaching, in song, in singing, in writing. So many people are writing books now that I know and sharing their voice that way. Sharing the voice in art, getting messages out there and what's inside out, and in so many different ways. So it's just going to be a season of exploring all of that. Then we'll talk about strategies of how to do it. Like, how did we get from perhaps losing our voice? And I think at some time in our lives, we all lose that true expression. And I think it's part of our journey, really, is to have it, to step away from it, and however society does that. And then how do we get it back? I think that's maybe the ebb and flow of life, really, and of the journey that we have. Um, so every voice is important. I think that this inspiring, as you said, it's inspiring others and inspiring everybody, that every voice is important in the universe. It's important to humanity, it's important to animals, it's important to nature, and our authenticity is important, that we have that. Our light shines brighter when we're authentic. So I think that's part of being inspirational, is to be authentic. So I'd love to start with a question for you is, what was a touchstone you had as a child? What was something that, so for me, as an example, it was a moment where I was with my mother. She had taken me, I was at school, but we'd gone to another school, and I was dancing with scarves. I don't remember why, I don't remember who was with me, but I remember this moment of freedom. And that always comes back to me as a touchstone, that feeling of just freedom. So, what was a touchstone for you as a
mm,
child?
I love that. I think what's there as kids too is often like that connects to our core values then too, right? So for me, I think it was probably awe. And the thing that comes in the most was like I lived in Pennsylvania, and it was very rural, and in the backyard we would have deer come, and I would like lift up rocks and find frogs or snakes, and like I always was interested in playing with animals and nature and like exploring the natural world. And for me, I think there was just always so much awe anytime that I found wildlife. Like I just was like, oh, look at this. There's something else here besides just me and my family. So that is like a touchdown for me. I literally was like, would touch a rock and find a frog or find a snake and get excited.
Oh, I, I, I so hear you there. My father was a biologist, and that was our life, was nature, and he had taught us that there was a world at your feet. And as we grew up, we're taught to look up, look where you're going, look where you're going. But I always remember he taught us there's a world in the present moment at your feet, under that rock, like you say, and in nature, and it's right there in the present moment. So that's beautiful, that how you explain it as being in awe of it. That's wonderful.
I
So,
still
hmm?
have say, I feel like when I'm at the ranch, I just get so excited anytime I see something. We have baby frogs right now at the ranch, and it brings me back to my childhood and those moments. And I get so excited because I'm just like, you're right. Like, that's so awesome your dad said that, because that's what it is. There's a whole world. There's also a world up in the sky too. But I do love the world underneath our feet.
Yeah, yeah. And there's so many microcosms of worlds, like that little puddle that looks like it's just a puddle. When you look really closely and scoop up a jar of it and look inside of it, it's a whole other universe, as is looking up above us too. So, wow, yeah. Well, we could talk about that one all day long. Wonderful. So let's go to the other side and let's dig in just a bit deeper. As I said before, I think we all, at some point, our voice is challenged. Maybe not, we don't fully lose it. Maybe we do, but our voice is challenged. I've had people on here talk about society's check boxes, and those check boxes that we have to check off as we go through life. And I certainly was that growing up, that, you had the do's and the don'ts. You had the keeping up with the Joneses, as the old saying goes. And all of that tends to decrease, I would say, your true expression. So I'm going to give the floor to you for a while, and maybe you could share with us and dig a little deeper into, what was that for you?
I think many different things, and I think that is the case with a lot of people for sure. I think for me, when I was little, I was very rambunctious. I was very loud and extroverted, and I had a dad that worked in corporate America, and he was in human resources, and he was very, I think he was dealing with people's problems all day long. And so I think when he came home, he wanted a quiet space, and I was not necessarily that. So, he shared this with me when I was going through my master's program in spiritual psychology. I hadn't remembered it, but I had other moments that I did remember where, if I was too loud, it was be quiet, right? Or like from a common be quiet to a screaming be quiet to a hair pull be quiet, right? Trying to really shut down all of that energy and expression and exuberance that I had naturally. And I kind of look back and I see it as like shining my light. And I know we've had, good conversations, and he feels embarrassed or guilty or bad about that. And my master's program is in compassionate self-forgiveness. So, a lot of forgiveness of self and others. But, when we're young, we can learn like, hey, your bigness is not allowed, right? Your voice is not appropriate or allowed here. So I did feel like it got shut down quite a bit. And hey, I can imagine it now, right? Like if I was working all day and I came home and I just wanted quiet space and I needed to decompress, like it would drive me nuts if I had kids running around too. I totally can relate and understand. And at the same time, I was just being a kid, right? So neither of us was really wrong, but there's different ways of creating that. And there were times, even like if I was at the dinner table and I wanted to share about my day as even like a young kid or teen or tween, and it was, let's take a moment of silence, and that was his way of trying to like disrupt this, and there was a lot of like kind of fighting for airtime at the dinner table. And so, it became stressful at times. I've tracked some of like my not wanting to sit down and eat for very long, like just be, to some of that, honestly. And it's kind of funny how there's these like formative things that can happen when we're kids, that can affect our self-expression and our voice and our bigness or our energy. It's funny because I think sometimes like feeling like my dad didn't want to hear me as a kid, kind of I did the opposite in life where I was like, I want to be a public speaker, right? I want to be on podcasts. I want to share my voice. I want to write. And I've always loved to talk. It's just, I also love listening and hearing people's stories, which is why I love the coaching part of what I do, but I love to talk. I always have. So I think that was there when I was little. I have stories as I've grown up, but that was the formative years and kind of taught me like, some things like around like I wasn't allowed to like fully be myself, right?
Mhm. So let's follow that on as as you get into those teenage years where society more than your parents is encroaching on those our voices a bit. How was that for you moving, forward there?
Yeah, it's funny. So, like, I remember I share about this in my TEDx talk, but when I was in sixth grade, I was neighed at because I loved horses so much. And I was kind of like the weird horse girl. And the boys all neighed at me, like, they made fun of me. And I felt like I didn't have a voice because what was I going to say back to them? Like, shut up or stop it. Like, I just kind of enclosed. And I think you mentioned this in the beautiful flyer you created for this around how we have these trauma responses and we go into freeze, right? We can do fight, flight, freeze, fawn, but for me, there were times when I did fight, and there were times mostly when I froze and I was like, "Ooh, why am I being, attacked?" Or why are people being mean? And now I know more about how people, how kids are in sixth grade and all of that. But that was another piece, and then as a teen, I think I felt awkward a lot of the time. So I always had a voice with my girlfriends, and I always had a voice when I was around animals. So, hence me really having a drive to support women and having a drive to be around animals now. But it was challenging at time. When I felt like the authority male figure or that other or the boys when I was younger was like kind of pushing me down, right? So
Yeah, no, I hear you. They are such formative years, those. But then we go into like our 20s where now we're done school, or some of us, and moving into those check boxes, like I said before, those check boxes, like, okay, now what do I have to do? Do I, that get a job, get married, have kids, keep working, maybe get another job. My daughter always said the white picket fence. And she said from a very young age, I don't want the white picket fence. So what about those years then?
yeah, I definitely felt like there was a script that I was supposed to follow to go to a good school and to get a good job. And I did that. But I never wanted kids. And I was always never afraid to say that because it was just something I knew at my core I wasn't going to have human children. And I didn't care if anyone judged me. Like didn't matter. It was such a core thing for me. I now have like 7 animals, so I have children, but they're in a different form.
Oh,
So it's one of those things though that like that was always okay, but like at times it's been really hard because I didn't get married yet, right? And that is something that either I'll judge myself for or I'm worried others will judge me for. And so that's a piece that I definitely think, I didn't follow that. I also didn't follow the check marks in the fact that I became an entrepreneur. And I decided to really go and follow like my soul's calling and not the path that I had originally set out, which was I was very ego driven for a while. And I'm like, how can I get the title, the most money, and so I worked in entertainment and I had a really kind of big cushy job and a lot of success in that space and then was not fulfilled. And I'm like, why am I not fulfilled? What's going on? And I realized like fulfillment was not about ego pursuit. It was about like the soul calling in me to be of service and to do what I love. And
mm.
then to get permission to do that. I didn't think my hobby could ever become my career. Right. And then it did.
But I, I I know I grew up in an age where the two didn't meet, because I grew I in my 20s, 30s, I worked in the horse industry, and that was my business, that was my life. And many people would say to me, but that's your hobby. It can't be both.
Right.
It's just not okay for it to be both, and to buck the system, so to speak, and say, no, it is both. In fact, it's better if it's both. Like, can you elaborate on that just a bit, as for yourself? That
Yeah, the when I left corporate America, I had started like an inspirational channel, and I really thought that was my path and what I was here to do, and it just wasn't going anywhere. And I was like, okay, I need to do like what else am I doing? And I had started leasing a horse at the time. And my first mentor was doing work with equine therapy with addicts in rehab and recovery. And I was like blown away at what was happening in just a couple hours with the power of horses. So I said, I need to know more about this. And then I just dove in. But the first year I kind of got in my own way because I said, well, this is my hobby. This is my greatest love. Like, I can't bring my type A corporate executive into this world that is so sacred and pure to me and like all about my inner child, all about play, all about love. I was like, my ego is going to kill this world, right? So I was afraid of that. I was also afraid that like I wasn't allowed to have a dream that was that big and that important and that beautiful, like, because I didn't know anyone else that loved their job as much as I knew I was going to love this. And so I really got in my way. I was like, the who am I, right? Do I deserve this? I love the whole Marianne Williamson quote, like it's our light that scares us often, right? And like can we shine bright enough? And so I got in my way for about a year until I was finally like, enough, like let's just do this. And the horses were like, just trust us, like it's gonna be fine. And it has been. And I also think a lot of people sometimes still hold it as a hobby, and there are times when I notice I'm treating it like a hobby instead of a business, and I need to shift or blend like my practical and my marketing skills and my business savvy with the love and the horse girl that just wants to play and have fun and
Mm.
hang out. And I have to really kind of like blend those energies together. But I mean, my dad flat out said to me, he goes, well, I wish I could have been an entrepreneur, and I just don't think other generations were raised to believe that they could really have their soul's calling. Like you at master's program, we called it the Entelechy, right? Which is the acorn that in it is coded and it knows it's going to become this big oak tree, but we're just like, no, I have to make a certain amount of money and do it a certain, like we're really programmed in so many ways until we break free. And that's really what I realized. Like I went through a deep, like a deep, authentic self exploration to realize what was in my heart and my soul to do.
Oh, there's so much there. So I want to go back to you talked about using that sort of your type A personality and that ego, but you've been able to, how did you blend it? Like, what have you had to do to the word that comes to my heart is soften. Like, how did you soften that ego and bring it into this other world?
Yeah, I had a really good mare who kicked my butt. um, no, I did. I had a horse named Felici that I was leasing, and I was trying to do things the old way, and she was like, that's not going to work. So she taught me, and like, I had a little breakdown to a breakthrough one day in the arena, and she's like, it's time to lead with love. Like, it's time to be
Mm,
coming from heart. And so she taught me how to blend strength and firmness and being goal oriented with softness and love and kindness and listening and partnership and like really putting the relationship before the outcome, because I
mm,
had not that in corporate America in the boys club. And that's another place where I lost who I was and I lost my voice at times, was in the boys club, but in entertainment. But I feel like the horses brought me back. Like they brought me back to my truth, and her especially. And she died about 2 years into me having her, and it really broke me open in a big way. And then I got another horse, and then she passed a couple of years later, and that broke me open even more. So I softened through a lot of grief and loss. And also through realizing that like the old ways were going to work for me anymore, especially not in a space of like a soul's calling, right? Or career calling. If I need to go, I couldn't muscle my way into that, and I had to be an authentic person and leader. I had to be like this mother archetype that was inside of me that needed to come out. Like there were so many people that I had not known about myself because I hadn't been given the chance to really explore them until the
mm.
horse.
That's really interesting. Yeah, yeah. So I want to go back to you talked about um, knowing something in your core. How do you know that? How do you know? Like, what is it what's that feeling that the only thing I can do is come up from my heart here. Like, what's that inkling that like this is part of me. This is in my core. What is that for you?
Yeah, such a beautiful question to reflect on. I think it's for me, like there's an inner knowing, which is part of the intuition. Like the intuition is like I can hear guidance and all of that, which is lovely. But there's this feeling inside where I'm like, I just know this. I don't know how I know it. And then if I go practice it and put it out into the world, for instance, like speaking or like knowing I had to create a card deck for the horses, like knowing that that was for me to do, it was one of those things where it's like you just show up for it and then it keeps unfolding and the next step unfolds and the next step unfolds and then there's success. So it's mirrored back to you that this was actually for you to do this, what and it was like with the inspirational movie channel, I was so convinced from my brain that that's what I was here to do, but the signs they were red lights, they were not
Mhm.
green. So I think it's this like it's in me, let me play and explore and experiment, and then are there green lights? And if there are green lights, that's feedback from the universe that like that's part of your path, I
Yeah,
think.
yeah. No, I hear you. I think I know for me, it's when something like that comes to me, it's I actually let it go. And if it stays with me, then okay, and that's that green light is no, I'm still here. You can try to push me over here, but I'm still here. And you keep trying to push away, and it's like, no, I'm not going to go away. And then you start following it, like you said, and there it is. The lights go on. All the lights. It's like driving down the road. All the lights are green. It's like, yeah, you got it. Excellent. Wow. Um, so along the way, along the journey, what have been some of your biggest fears?
Gosh. So at one point I created a program called Facing Your Fears. So every day for 40 days I faced one of my fears, like crazy stuff. Like I tracked it because I was really inspired by that book or that quote, do one thing every day that you're afraid of by
Roosevelt.
Eleanor.
Yeah, yeah.
So for 40 days in a row, I would face
Oh,
my fear.
really? That's crazy.
I've done it twice in my life. I've done 40 days back to back to the point where like I would do so like I have really random little fears like being stuck in an elevator. So like I would just ride the elevator if I hadn't gotten to it that day. I would just like go do it and I'd be like breathe, you're fine. Like but there are like lots of things like I feel like fear's been something that's always kind of like been a part of my life, but I'm always willing to face them. So I'd say, currently if we look at currently my fears, sometimes it's like I get worried about what's going on with humanity right now and like
Mm,
economy and like money in general. Like I think there's big shifts going on and I'm not entirely sure what they all are, but I'm noticing that people are not investing in themselves the way they used to, even just a couple of years ago. So but I feel like people really need to do that right now. So I'm
yeah.
curious about that. But then I wonder like I go into some of these spaces where I'm like, how do I serve and what if people don't want it anymore, right? And then I go to like, I'll just go play with my horses, but I want to still be of service. So I think sometimes, it's like it all boils down probably to self-worth stuff. Some of my fears, like, do people like me? I ask myself that one. And
Yeah.
then I go, who cares? Their opinions don't like that. Let their opinions be their opinions. They're none of my business, but I still do like that's still a fear because reputation as a solopreneur is huge, right? You know how that is,
Mhm, mhm. No.
you know.
So the this the awareness of that we have those feelings and those thoughts and those phrases, those words that come to us, but you've been able to step through them. And is that part, in that, like say, facing those fears is just say, oh, you're there. Okay, that's nice. Now we're gonna like, what maybe is your steps in that? How, okay, I hear you saying that, head. Yeah. What
Yeah.
what do you do when you hear that?
I mean, I love Louise Hay's, like, she says, thank you for sharing to your fears. I do love remembering that false evidence appearing real. I love that, remembering that most of the things we're afraid of never happen. I'm always afraid of, like, I'm like very protective of my animals. Like, so I think what it is it's like choosing to still live with our hearts open, even though stuff can happen anywhere, anytime. And knowing that, and then still like showing up, right? And still taking even just one baby step a day in the direction of our dreams is important. But I also love Matt Kahn's approach, which is like feel the feeling and just like give it some space time, because usually it's a part of us that's scared. Um, and just needs to be heard and felt and loved. And when we can hold space for that and we can be with that, it often dissolves. So, I balance the masculine and the feminine with my fears, which is like loving it, mothering it, and like being there for it. And then also being like, okay, you've shared enough now. We're going to go take action and do this anyways. So,
I
and
know
you'll
that.
feel okay, like you're still
Yeah,
here.
yeah,
So,
yeah. And I love that you're, that balancing of that masculine, feminine. Uh, so tell me about a time, or tell us about a time when, like, when you shared authentic, like, what does it feel like to you to be just so deeply authentic and in that moment? You talked about a TEDx. I would imagine that might have been one that was just, well, what's that feeling for you in those moments? And maybe share a moment or two like that.
yeah, I had a process happen several years ago where I felt compelled to write certain things on Facebook. And it was a practice of this has to come through me. I have to get it out, and always setting an intention that it would be helpful, right? Not setting an intention that I would just dump, right? Or just like, but really just setting an intention that it would be helpful and that I would be authentic. And I found that people loved it. I found that it gave people permission. I found that it was touching on stuff that was going on for people at the same exact time. And so it just became this like, I am willing to be raw. I am willing to be authentic. I need to do, and so it would just pour out of me. So my writing has come at times from those places where I've given myself permission to share, checking my intention, right? Making sure that there's like some healthy intention there, and being willing to do it. And so I have shared from that place. There are times when I don't like the hardest thing for me sometimes, even though I'm a marketer and that's all I did for 15 years, is still finding that voice where I'm promoting something in a very authentic way that's not promotional and salesy, but just from that place of like sharing. So, like even sharing about this, I could have been like, hey, listen to our conversation, right? But I was like, do struggle with some of these things because that's what we're going to talk about today. Like, and I still struggle with them. And let's all not like put masks on and pretend that we're all perfect, because we're not. Like, we have a
Yeah,
lot of us, especially women, have a lot of stuff going on in our throats, like that is there for healing and looking at and reflection. So
yeah.
yeah, I recently started something that no one really knows about. A couple people know about it, but I started to record audios on my phone,
Mhm.
and they're truth bombs that usually I go through. And there's a couple coaches I follow that do truth bombs, and they do them beautifully. Like, they're not doing it to be right, they're doing it to be helpful, which I think there's a big distinction in that. And I started to record these, and they're all about 10 minutes, and I will eventually publish them. Maybe not under my name, we'll see. But they're deep truth bombs about topics that very few of us are willing to really like go into and
Mhm.
read about, right? And I call them the untalkables because it's stuff that people are really uncomfortable, like the untouchables. And I just was like, I have to share, I have to do this. And someday I'll get brave enough to publish them.
You put it
So
out there now.
if people want them, let me know. A couple of my no, you need to do this. You got to, because it's a different side of who I am that is still very authentic and real, but it's sassy. It's like I have one of my horses is sweet and angelic and so kind, and the other one is super direct and super spicy and sassy. And she's teaching me it's okay to be more direct. You don't have to be nice all the time. It's okay to let people see your edges. So
Love it. And I think, I know for me, and when we had our own farm and had to be, even more marketing then and PR, it was that, I can't say that, it's arrogant. And it's like, well, no, it's not. It's just truth. It's what you need to say. But that old wives' tale, for want of a better word, but that old thing in the back of your head going, no, 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 that's arrogant. You don't want to be arrogant. And it's like, that was I think that's hard in business, and being authentic is
yeah.
to let some of those voices sort of trail away.
I was at a leadership event once and he said, I want you to introduce yourself, but not the typical way. I want you to brag for like 3 minutes straight. And everyone was like squirming around and getting really uncomfortable. And he's like, how often do you get a safe space to really brag and really share? And it was so cool because there was like one person in particular I was really drawn to. And then like her and I ended up having like lunch next to each other. And then she became a client for a while and like went through really big things and really needed the horses when she was going through that. And that all came from us being willing to be like so authentic with our bragging that we knew like where we could meet each other. And I mean, I just saw the Barbie movie and it was literally that whole like, yeah, you can't be too cocky, you can't be too this, you can't like like women are told all the time, like be seen and not heard was what it used to be. And now it's like, you can't brag, you're too this, you're too that. And it's like, I'm tired of the twos, you know?
I found myself doing that in an email today. I found myself, somebody asked about some of the stuff I was doing, and I found myself telling them, and then I found myself apologizing, going, this sounds like a pitch. I'm sorry, it's not intended. So exactly as you're saying there even that then there was that little apology going, oh, that's maybe too much. But they
Yeah.
asked. Yeah.
I tell people all the time, pitch me, right? I'm either going to be yes or no or maybe. Like it's okay, but it's one of those things where I'd rather you own it and tell me you're doing that because that's authentic, right? Then rather than just like sliding, try to slide it in. And I think that it goes back to like what Felici said. It's like put the relationship first, and the outcome will take care of itself, right? So
Mm-hmm.
that's kind of how I'm looking at anything I do in that realm of like, okay, where's the relationship? The sale or anything else that I want will come as a byproduct of really taking care of the relationship. And I've worked with sales guys and they go right into like, let's just make this deal happen. And I'm like, let's slow it down so we can cultivate relationship. So
Exactly.
is trust is built on sharing who we really are.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
and I am someone that I love press for everyone in the business
Sure.
because we shine a light on what we're doing in the equine world.
Well, exactly. And I think it's part of it. I call it a shared evolution, is that I think we tend to say, when we hear somebody else say, oh, something that was similar to what we were thinking, it's like, oh, that's theirs. Oh, I'm going to stop thinking it. But there was a light bulb went off and said, we should all be thinking this. That's called a shared evolution.
I love
So
that.
it's okay for everybody to be authentic. Build those lights, like shine those lights. So
Yes.
yeah,
Yeah. And
interesting.
we find our paths sometimes through other people's stories or other people's, like experiences. So it's important that we don't hold them back. I realized when I went into being writing books, like how badly I needed to share my story as my own healing, right? And my own,
Yeah.
when Felici died, I wrote her book because it was like I had to be cathartic. I had to have a process for the grief. And that part of my expression is, and my voice is tied to like moving through grief. So it doesn't get so stuck, right?
Mm-hmm. Interesting. Can you talk more about that? Well, grief
I
and voice. I just that yeah, that's
it's the like, yeah, it's the like sharing, right? Like I see so many times like in the grief process we need to share our story, the story of how an animal died or the story of how we were and what, and like there we need to have spaces I think for that at times, like so others can really bear witness to our stories, and that alone is healing to tell them and to express what we need to express. And I'll never forget, there was a time at one of the ranches I worked and a client needed to scream, and she's like, "Can I scream?" And I'm like, "Yes." Because in my per where I was trained, we were always emoting in all different ways. I was
Yeah.
used to that. But the ranch owner was like, "You can't do this." And I was like, I need my own space, right? Because I want to be able to give people a place. Like if they have a scream that needs to come out, they can. That's part of using our voice. And I love breath work because I get to I will he will ask us. He puts on a song at a certain time and he said,
Mhm.
"Primal, do your primal scream." So it is part of the grief process to release the anger, to cry, to
Yeah.
write, to journal, and to talk. It's just part of it.
Mhm. Yeah. It makes it more authentic, it sounds like. It's like those check boxes we talked about at the beginning, like, oh, I'm grieving. I can't do this. I can't do this because other people will be. Whereas everything I hear you saying there is authentic. It's almost like authentic grieving.
Yeah. And it's like goes back to, so I love the words deep truth. Like that was something that came to me. I think Greg Braden actually wrote a book called Deep Truth, but I had been using those words, came to me intuitively like a long time ago. So I was using them with myself and clients all the time. And sometimes someone will tell me something and then I'm like, no, what's your deep truth? Because they're not deep
Yeah.
enough to like what they really feel. And what they really feel is, I'm really angry at my ex for doing what he did. And it's safe to have that anger and it's safe to be with that instead of just being like, well, I'll forgive him and I'll move on. Okay. Like I'm all for forgiveness. How are you really, like, what do you really want to say to him? I love Gestalt for being able to use our voices. I love being able like to write letters to people and then burn them. Like we don't need to share our anger or upset with others through like sending the letter. We can just write it and burn it or shred it. But
Yeah.
form of releasing the emotional energy instead of like letting it fester or letting it sit.
Yeah.
So I'm only asking someone, okay, what's really your deep truth on this subject? Or this would be good to talk about, like, how do you express yourself when you are triggered, right? How do you share? That's happened to me recently and I'm still working on it like a lot, Linda. And it's like a daily practice these days, but it's like, how do I share how, like, that I am triggered and what's actually going on for me without instigating a fight, but like, what is my deep truth? Like my deep truth is right now I feel hurt by what's going on. I take responsibility for my part, and I also like would love for you to consider your part, right? Like, and to have these like deeper conversations that are our deep truth. Like, what do we really need to say? Sometimes we say deep truth, no one needs to hear it besides a good
Right.
coach.
Yeah.
Other people need to hear it, right?
Absolutely. I think it was interesting what you said there, and I think we all like need to have offerings of more script. The word I use the word scripts, but just as you said that you were saying there with I'm really triggered right now, you had a way to say it. And I think with our talking about it, voices is often we don't know that way to say it. So the voice stays in. And even that sharing of here's a way you could say it.
Yes.
Here's another way you could say it. Because we
Yes.
don't know.
I love that. We had a skill we learned in the master program called carefrontation, and it was, how do you express yourself with care, right? And it's like, I watch the horses, they're clear, they're congruent, right? They're not like, oh, please don't take it personally. Like, they're just like, this is how I feel, clear as day, right?
Yeah.
And so I think but my mom has often said that to me. She's like, can you write a script for this so that when if this happens again, you'll be able to see something? Because I'll never forget one of the times I lost my voice twice in a really big way, and I literally couldn't speak. Well, it happened to me again recently, right when we decided we were going to do this topic. And I went, "Oh, okay." And so, and now I look at it and I give myself forgiveness. Like, okay, it's okay. You didn't have a voice in that moment.
Mhm.
Do you a voice now? If so, how would you express it? Right? Like, how would you actually share it now so that so you honor yourself, right? That's a big piece to it. um in the future, how would you handle this differently, right? What's the learning, like, because all of life is just a school and we're here to learn. So I look at it as, now I have, sometimes I have scripts, but my first mentor, and I have so much gratitude for her. She gave me my first horse. She showed me this equine therapy world and learning world. But there was a day once when my horse said to me, "Do not put me in a clinic like that again. I do not want to do circles for 3 hours." And I went, "Oh, I'm so sorry. You're right." Right. So I made a comment to my mentor. I don't really know if the horses are enjoying this kind of work. And I don't really know if this trainer, we'll just call him a trainer, is, like really helping us or honoring the horses. And she looked at me and was like, what you have to share doesn't matter. Like, flat out said that to me. And was like, because this cowboy was the most important deal. And it was like, we honored him. He got to say and do what he needed to do. And what I thought didn't matter, because I didn't have as much horse experience,
Mm.
all of that. And I was just trying to be a voice for the horses. And I knew in that moment that we were on different planets and that that was okay. And that I needed to find my own planet of horse people that would be okay with what I had to share and would like
Mm.
it and with it. But, that was a time when I was kind of actively shut down. And then there were other times where she would say something and almost like attack or just like correct or say something. And it was harsh. And I was like, and I didn't know what to say. And then I realized, hindsight's 2020. I'm like, oh, I could have said X or Y. And that's when we realized, like, okay, you know, it's okay that we're not able to express our voice in that moment, but let's not beat up on ourselves for it, right? Or make ourselves wrong, or even make that other person wrong, because that's how they were taught to talk to people.
Mm.
That's what they learned from their upbringing. I can choose better and differently. I can be around better and different people. And I can also, use my voice in the future. Now, one of my scripts is, please don't talk to me that way. I don't let anyone treat me that way.
Mhm.
Like, and that's my boundary. I rarely have to say it because I surround, knock on wood, I surround myself with wonderful people, but I go, you
Yeah.
know talk to me that way, right?
Yeah.
Or say I have a zero policy for violence, so I'm leaving. Like, and I will not engage in
Yeah.
these things,
Yeah.
so.
Do you think, with as you're saying that, I hear that maybe that journey of confidence when you have those scripts. Do you believe that, or what do you feel is the tie between confidence and authenticity?
Mm, yeah, great connection piece. I think that when we really know who we are at our core, like we know our hearts, we know our intentions, we know what we mean, we know how we live our lives, we've watched ourselves, we're self-aware, that we gain confidence because we know who we are and we can express from that point. So if we're misunderstood, we can go back and say, wow, I really was misunderstood, that my heart was this. And I'm misunderstood a lot. Like, I try really hard. I do audio text now because my text come across that well. It's not who I am. You hear my voice and everyone's always like, "Oh, I'm happy to hear your voice." And I'm like, "Yeah, because you can hear like my true expression in my voice, but my texts don't come across great." And it's partly just the technology of it. So it's knowing what communication, my healer says, know which communication sources make you feel safe, know which ones make you feel most you, and use them. I don't need people to do it back the same way to me. Got to be them, but I've got to be me.
Yeah.
So how I show up now, and I think there is a confidence to a when you use your voice and you're celebrated, which has happened to me. When you use your voice and you're okay, right? You're not killed, you're not hung, you're not,
Exactly.
like,
Yeah.
and that you're still okay or safe, that can form confidence. And then also when you know like who you are and in your heart that like I know I'm here to serve. I know my ego can be a pain at times, but like honestly, I'm not calling people names. I'm not trying to hurt people. I'm not I'm not hurt, so I'm not hurting others. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
But when people are mean to me and they call me names, I'm like, that's just someone that's hurting. So I have compassion, and then I also get to choose if I want a boundary too.
exactly. Yeah, that clarity. Yeah. For
Yeah.
them, toward, telling them that clarity. Yeah, absolutely. Brilliant. Oh, I love it. So, as we sort of start to wind this down, I'm wondering if you can give us and give the listeners three strategies or pieces of wisdom in that, inspiring a voice, inspiring people to find it, share it, look for it. But what are three strategies that you might have?
I'm a huge fan of using the audios on our phone. And when I get triggered, I did it today. I go to my audio, I let it rip, I let my ego do what it needs to do. I get it out so it's not stuck. It's not, I'm not pushing it down. It's like the self-expression is allowed. Um, it's like when I watch my horse and she's got built up stuff, I can see it. I'm like, oh, I'm not getting on you until you've been free lunged and exercised, because she has to express some of the stuff that I can tell in there.
Yeah.
So with us, so I would say use your audios, don't send them if they're really delete them, but use them to get your voice out. Like, and I've done it with like some political events where I've been
Mm,
like, I can't talk to anyone about this right now because like I'm not interested in right or wrong. I just
mm,
need to move the energy of how I'm feeling about this
yeah,
political.
yeah, yeah.
So audios, I love audios. Writing, handwriting is huge. So in our master's program, they taught us to do this thing called free form writing. And it's really great for any time we're triggered. And you just write, 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 write. You don't read it. You don't. And now I don't even have sentences. I just like scratch the paper. Your hand is connected to your heart.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah.
You move energy through freeform writing. I give it to all my clients, especially if they need to process and they don't want to process with another person or in another way. Like, so writing, freeform writing when you're upset, journaling when you are curious or when you're grateful or when you
Mm,
have you want to track during the day. It was crazy, but I really truly think the reason I know my voice somewhat well is because in our master's program, at one point we were keeping 5 journals, 5 different
wow.
journals
All different.
every every day.
Wow. That's a
It
lot
was,
to carry around,
it was a lot. It's a lot on my nightstand, right? Like,
physically and metaphorically. Wow.
I mean, so the self awareness was huge. So it was definitely, so I think writing is really, really big. Um, so write something that you can throw away, write something that you can keep that's just for you.
Mm,
That's also a place where you can write out your scripts and save them. And then write something that's for the world, write something that's of service for the world, right? Like your beautiful equine leadership magazine, like that's of service for the world. Like write something. And nowadays you can write and publish on your own blog. You can jump on Medium. You can, like you can be published so easily. It's so beautiful. It didn't
yeah.
used to be. So write something that's of service for the world, and that's how you'll find your voice. So you do it through the audios, and then you can do it through the actual hand. And I think handwriting is so important. I still write cards out to people. I still like I like writing versus like just typing all the time. And so that's number 2. And then I think the third is to know your intuition, because your intuitive voice is really your highest authentic self-expression. And again, like, thank gosh for this master's program, because we had to do self counselings. So I had to develop through, this was typed, me talking to my authentic self voice, my intuitive voice, and getting her feedback. So it was like I was coaching myself all the time, and it was beautiful. So I think that's another way you can really develop your voice, when you can understand what your real true intuition and higher self is sharing, because that's really our highest expression of our voice.
Of course.
So
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, I love it. Love it. Um, yeah, and interesting with all the different writings there, that yes, some are, but for me, they leak. Sometimes one will leak to another, and I'll read back over an email going, oh, well, that sounded like it was a work email and it was just getting the facts out. let's soften it and attach it, like you just, this motion, like let's attach it to the heart
Yeah.
and see how the words change. And,
Beautiful.
oh, okay, that came out a lot differently. And I know the person that pushed me towards that and said, oh, that sounds like a work email.
Yeah.
Maybe
Well,
let's shift it. Yeah.
we move so fast, right? And we're
Yeah.
communicating all the time. And I find like I sometimes get corporate women who come to me and they're like, I'm not communicating well with my bosses. I'm not, I don't feel like I have a voice. I don't feel like I can be promoted. I don't think I'm being heard. I get a lot of that. And one of the first things I'll ask them is like, before you send an email, can you set the intention that you're sending with love? Can you feel light going from your heart into the email? Can you just like, even just that is a little practice of just picturing like going out. I mean, I set my intention before I jump on any podcast. There are days when I'm definitely more in my head
Of course.
than
Yeah.
I,
Yeah.
but I mean, like my horse said to me earlier, she's like, you're thinking too much. And I'm like, yeah, I think you're right. And she'll
Yep.
just like she'll just push her head into my head. She like puts it down on top. And I'm like, thank you
I
for the
get
rope.
it.
So yeah,
They have their ways of just speaking to us without saying anything at all.
totally. And reminding us to come from this place, right? Because that's what feels good and that's what creates connection. And that's what like where real success is and where we're really felt, and I think these days people are so much more aware and in tune and intuitive that they feel energies much more than like they can read something and resonate with it, or like it's like there's a feeling that's there for people. So,
Exactly. Exactly. So tell us what you have going on. Let's shift a little bit here and step away from that part. Tell us what you have going on. Tell us, do you have programs going on? Do you have books coming out?
I
Audio
mean,
things coming out? Truth bombs coming out?
yeah, I mean, we just had this fun, like, equine leadership. You have, which I'm grateful to have a story in. I feel like for me, I am working on the book, the Felici book. I am working on a podcast. And I also, at this point, I'm always, coaching virtually and in person. And I love speaking. I love having platforms to be able to share.
Mm.
And honestly, like my baby for this year was really in a way that I got to express my voice, because for me, I could always express my voice except for the woo woo, right? Or the spiritual or what. And I was like, nope, can't show that part because I'm used to being corporate America and all of that. And then I finally was like, okay, I'm more and more comfortable sharing that I have all these spiritual beliefs and all these practices and all. And so I started to channel the horses and let them speak through me. And then they said, well, we want you to write about your piece to this too, and then also do some exercises. So I created the card deck, the Awakening with Equines card deck, and created it. And the artist, that is how she speaks her truth. She just pours her beautiful energy, Nika Ware, about the horses and nature and all of that into these 40 cards. And she's just been so wonderful to partner with on this. So that has been my baby this year, the card deck, and my way of sharing, coming out of the spiritual closet and feeling like I was still safe to be talking about that.
Oh, I've never heard it put like that, but that's awesome. Awesome. Thank you for being here. Thank you for
Thank
sharing. That's I think it's so important that we find our voices and that we inspire others to find their voices and share with in sharing our stories, we share, people don't feel like they're alone, that they're not the only one that has lost their voice and is looking for it, and it is there still within them. It's not gone somewhere, it's still within them. It's just it needs to find its way out, and that's that support. And I find you spoke of service. I find tied with service is support. I think they're almost one and the same, but that we can support each other in community so that we all find our voices, men and
Yes.
women, everyone and everyone everywhere. So thank you for starting us off on season 2, and I'm excited to see where this journey goes. I hope we find lots of more pilots of their own lives and their own journeys and get to talk to them. But thank you for setting the bar way up here, which is awesome. I'd love to, and Oprah, we're going to go back to Oprah here, but she said something once. It says, every life has a story, and every story has a lesson. I always take that an extra step and add a little bit of my own to it, but don't ever think your story isn't worth telling. Because every story is worth sharing, and every story is worth hearing, and every story inspires in some way, shape, or form. So for those that are listening, thank you for listening. If you are called to share your story and your voice, I would love to hear from you. We are still slowly setting up this season. We'll have the next person up soon, but we're just finalizing details on that. In the meantime, head on over to Inspire Me Forward Facebook page and join us there. It is it's a private page, so you'll need to join that. And with that, thank you, Katie. Thank you for joining me. Thank you for being here. Thank you for going through all the technical stuff to get here. It's just using its voice, that's all.
Powerful stuff.
That's all. Okay. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you.